The Game 2 loss felt like a lot more than just the evening of a series. Will it linger? What can be learned? We go behind the scenes in Detroit before Game 3. Oh, what a treat for our YouTube friends. Zack on the scene at Comerica Park, where we assess the damage of Game 2 and look ahead to Game 3.
I feel like I'm a meteorologist in front of the map showing here's where you can expect some storms, and here's where Bo Naylor is hitting one out to that part.
Wow, is that a prediction? Got to be in the starting lineup to do that. If you'd have done that before Game 2, I don't think you would have ever pointed to the mound behind you and said, and this is where Emmanuel Clase is going to serve up a 3-run home run to Kerry Carpenter. I don't think that would have been in anywhere in the predictions, but we witnessed it. We saw it. Boy, there are times where I wake up the next day, and if it was a crazy ending, I do have to mentally process whether that was real or not. Going back to yesterday and the feeling I woke up with this morning, it still didn't feel real. Because Detroit accomplished, as I tweeted, one of the most difficult things in baseball to accomplish this year. They did that in Game 2 and potentially just completely demoralized the Guardians. So I'm curious, you spent a few minutes around them. Where is everybody at?
I think you know this team. I think you know professional athletes. It's, they're not like moping and walking into their clubhouse with their heads down and still wallowing in defeat. There is a shock value, right? Like, we've seen Clase struggle before. We've seen him blow a game before. We saw plenty of it last season. But we've never seen that. If you would have told me the Tigers were going to score 3 runs against Clase, I would have said, wow, who made the errors? Who had the bloop singles? Who had the infield choppers? 3-run homer, the bottom of the order getting on base against him. Those were not things I would forecast. So I think that made it more jarring and difficult to process. And, the pitcher in this situation is always going to want to get back out there. And I'm curious to know how fans feel. Because it's one thing if Joe Borowski in 2007 blows a game and is like, hey, I want to get back out there. And fans are like, to hell you do. No, thank you, please. But with Clase, he's had one of the best relief seasons in history. So as a fan, are you shaken? Are you rattled?
Oof.
Do you have confidence when he goes back out there? I feel like he's earned that, but it's a short series and the playoffs are all about what you've done lately.
Yeah, and it's proof that you don't know anything. If you go back several hours before Game 2, we had a conversation about Game 1. We were talking about the formula working for Cleveland, and I don't need any assistance looking like an idiot, but I look even more like an idiot when I say I look around baseball and see all these bullpens blowing it, and I have this supreme confidence in the way Cleveland is set up. The amazing thing about it, I know not all of the relievers, once they came in, were extremely sharp in Game 2, maybe what we've grown accustomed to seeing. Now, if it's the regular season, you're not pulling Herron out early, you're not pulling Gaddis out early, you're letting them work their way through it in the playoffs. If there's any inkling that they don't have it or they're squaring them up or whatever, you just want your best pitcher in the game, you go to him, even if it means coming in a little bit early like they did with Clase. Well, it's weird when you have a team that's built on the bullpen and the bullpen doesn't come through. Everybody seems a lot more mortal because this is the difference. This is why Cleveland has to be better than everybody else in that bullpen because they don't necessarily have maybe whatever other teams have in their offense. And let's not lose sight of the fact that they still were held scoreless. So they still were going to have to eventually get a run across. But the most jarring thing is still watching the Superman character here. I go back to 1993 when DC Comics killed off Superman. And you're reading that comic book. I know it's 1993. You're reading that comic book, and it even says that he's going to die on the cover, but until that last punch from Doomsday,
alert.
You don't believe that it's going to happen, but it happened. Now, eventually, he did come back from the dead and became Superman again, so I'm rooting for that outcome for Emmanuel Clase.
Yeah, it was like, I think I think Cleveland's decision makers would have signed up for how the first 8 innings went. If you could have told them, hey, it's going to be a scoreless tie going into the 9th, they would have said, okay, we'll take it. Like, you survived Skubal. Skubal looked as dominant as Skubal can look. And when he left the game, you were tied. So advantage should be to Cleveland with their bullpen, and it didn't happen. And it's a reminder that, Austin Hedges said this, and I think I mentioned it, and it's going to stick with me, that, Skubal's ERA was almost 2.5. That means he gives up runs. Nobody's perfect. Clase gave up 5 runs all season, gives up 3 on 1 pitch. I think that's why this is so hard to fathom. But it's not like he's not infallible. Like, we've seen him give up runs before. So it's a reminder that the best laid plans are not always going to deliver. And they had set everything up. I think what makes it more jarring too is we keep drawing the connections to 2016 and the bullpen, and that bullpen, the only time they faltered, quote unquote, was Game 7 of the World Series. And that was Andrew Miller on fumes against David Ross from Dancing with the Stars fame, and then Brian Shaw, obviously, in extra innings. But it was so rare, and I think by Game 7 also it was like, it's, if Miller gives up a run, I can't critique him too much. But it was just the way Game 1 worked and the way Game 2 was working. I was kind of back in those 2016 in that mode, thinking, oh, well, these guys are just never going to give up a run. And I was certain that was going to end in a Cleveland walk-off, whether it was the 8th, the 9th, or a game winner, whether it was the 8th, the 9th, the 10th, the 11th, whatever.
Yeah, and it was easier to explain once you got to the end of 2016 and the bullpen faltered, because they had been written as much as they were going into that game. And by that point, Chicago had seen them a bunch, and you'd been seeing how they were pitching in the postseason. There weren't a lot of surprises about the way Andrew Miller, Brian Shaw, and Cody Allen were going to attack everybody by that point. So I can understand it. And maybe it helps me compartmentalize some of the grief that you feel in that moment. I think we're looking to do something similar with Game 2, looking for explanations, the narratives that we were talking about, how we all love them, because it helps us be able to explain something that isn't always easily explainable. Or maybe it is, but we're always looking for the answer as to why it happened.
You're right on cue, and it's hard to do. I think it's I don't know about you, I won't speak for both of us, but it's difficult, I think, for me sometimes, because sometimes weird stuff happens. Sometimes a game swings a certain way, and there's not some sweeping takeaway that needs to be proclaimed. It's just the Tigers won. Clase missed with a slider. Carpenter hit it out, and we can analyze it and psychoanalyze it and try to draw conclusions from it. But sometimes that just happens. Skubal pitched well. Cleveland hung tough. They had some key defensive plays that kept it scoreless. They couldn't come through. They kept grounding into double plays. And then Clase, just in a very rare circumstance, didn't have his best command and left a slider over the plate. And a guy who's really good against right-handed pitching crushed it. That's it. Like, I think that also is why, you asked, what's it like in the clubhouse? What's the team like? And they're not like, oh God, that game was a revelation. Like, now I don't know if we can come back from that. No, because that just, things happened. And it's almost like in the playoffs, it feels like we need narratives. We need just things that we can clutch onto that help shape in our heads what we think is going to happen moving forward, when Game 2 doesn't really have an effect on Game 3. And it's even worse when there's an off day. Like, there's nothing to do but to sit and analyze and overanalyze what happened, when in reality, like, Alex Cobb takes the mound in Game 3. He's not thinking, man, I need to carry us here because got to pick up Clase. No, he feels the motivation because he needs to pitch well for the team, period. Like, that, what happened in the 9th inning doesn't change that.
And we'll get to Cobb. We'll get to Game 3. I want to look back at some of the narratives that have existed from the minute that home run was given up. And I've seen them all, and I know you've seen them all in your Twitter mentions. I pulled five of them out.
I have not read my mentions, actually.
It's probably the better thing to do. I've pulled 5 of them out. And I was going to ask you whether they are warranted or BS. So let's just go through some of the biggest narratives that I have seen so far. The first one being Clase shouldn't have been there in the 8th inning. They shouldn't have gone to him as quickly as they did, make him go through an up and down before coming back out for the 9th.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Vogt actually answered that really well after the game because he simply said, we wanted our best pitcher on the mound in a key moment. The end. That's all I need to hear. If Gaddis gives it up, then aren't you asking why Clase wasn't in there? What are you saving him for?
Yeah, that's my thought.
So, yeah, I look, Gaddis might have gotten out of it. I don't know. I'm not going to second guess a manager using his best players in key situations. So I'll call BS on that. I understand the line of thinking better than I think some of these other ones you're going to throw at me, but I still say BS.
It's fair. That's fair. I'm 100% with you. If Gaddis had given it up, we'd all say, why? Why? It's kind of similar to what we're going to get to with Clase when it comes to 3 straight sliders and what you think his best pitch is. If your point is use your best pitch, then your point should be use your best pitcher. And in that case, I have no problem with going to Clase in the 8th inning. As efficient as he normally is, he's gone through ups and downs, meaning go out onto the field, back into the dugout, come back onto the field. So it's not like he's never done that before. You're not putting him in a foreign place. So I had no problem with that. And it's also, I didn't include this, but I did see quite a few of the closer and non-safe situations. If the psyche of the pitcher is that shaky, he should not be in the closer role to begin with.
That also means you would never use him. You weren't going to use him at all in that game. It's the most asinine argument. I'll never understand it. I mean, we had wars with other media members versus Manny Acta back in the day. It's 2024 and we're still doing that. So you don't use Clase because there's not going to be a save situation?
If you truly believe that your pitcher cannot handle the tie game, then they should not be the closer.
Yeah.
Remove them from the closer role, put them somewhere in the 5th or 6th when you're down by 6.
The guy had an 0.60 ERA. That's going to work in a tie game, a 1-run game, a 15-run game, a different sport.
Number 2, Clase shouldn't have pitched on Saturday.
What does that have to do with anything?
It was another chance to let the Tigers see him in a game that was a complete blowout. It was work that you didn't need to force him into because it was a 7-0 game.
On its own, I understand it. You didn't need him in a 7-0 game, and whereas I think Gaddis, Smith, Herron, it was good to get their feet wet just in a playoff atmosphere. Saying that, Clase is a guy who wants to pitch as often as possible. He likes to pitch every other day, he wants to pitch every day just to stay sharp. And the issue was he wasn't sharp in game 2. So if you would have preferred that he had an extra 2 days of rest, which would have meant he had like 10 days of rest. Yeah, I'm not buying that. Also, you don't know for sure that you're going to need him in game 2. They were facing school, but what if they were down 6-0? Then you definitely wouldn't have used Clase. And if you don't want to use him in game 1 because you want to save him for game 2, and then you don't use him in game 2, then you're talking 2 weeks of rest. And then what? Don't use him in game 3 unless it's a save situation. Like what are we doing here? Pitch your best pitchers.
We're looking for answers. That's what we're doing. We're trying to figure out something that seems
you're making me read the
unfathomable.
mentions I purposefully avoided.
I'm making you. These are just the narratives that I have seen, and I'm trying to sift through them myself. We talked about it. I didn't have a big issue with him pitching because he hadn't pitched. We're talking about Emmanuel Clase here. This is not somebody's 5th reliever that you're trying to hide and squeak your way through an outing. you want Clase in there no matter what, no matter how many times it has to happen in a 5-game series.
Guess what? Oh, you didn't want the Tigers to see him. First of all, Kerry Carpenter did not face him this season. So it's not like Carpenter got all this exposure and then knew what was coming. Second of all, everyone in the universe knows what the guy throws. It's 2 pitches. It's not hard to memorize. It's still hard to hit. And it doesn't matter if he faced a couple other hitters 2 days earlier. He needed 8 pitches to get past them on Saturday. It's not like, they worked him for 30 pitches, saw everything he could possibly have, and then got to him Monday. What else you got? You're making me mad.
What would the conversation have been if he didn't pitch on Saturday, came in, did that? Everyone would say, you left him not pitch for an entire week.
Right.
And
then
he was
be having the
he
rest
was
versus
not
rust
sharp. Yes.
conversation. Yeah.
Right. I tried to think about the other end of that. What if the other end of that had played out? And I would have been more mad if he looked unsharp in a game where you could have used him maybe in game 1. I mean, Vogt has to know his players inside and out. And it's up to him to know whether Clase would benefit from pitching on Saturday or not pitching on Saturday. He deemed that Clase would be better off having had the work. So I don't have a problem with him pitching in game 1. I certainly don't have a problem with him pitching in game 2 in a tie game. Because he's great. He's a great pitcher.
The point of these off days is you need to lean on that bullpen. You can't let them, they have to stay sharp. And the issue is these arguments are also clouding the fact that he just didn't have his best stuff.
Thank you.
He said he didn't have his best command. And that's the issue. Don't let the number 8 and 9 hitters get on base against you. You're Emmanuel Clase. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I know what's coming next. I know one of these that you're going to mention is probably, shouldn't he have walked Carpenter? And Carpenter's a really, I know, but the point is we're making all the excuses. We're trying to nitpick.
Yes.
We're trying to blame all these different people, whether it's the manager, whether it's the usage, whether it's this or that. And it's the guy didn't have it.
You know what it is?
Or he lost it during the outing. And it's just, again, it goes back to we need to find narratives and excuses and definitive explanations for why things happen and why they're not perfect. And it's the guy just didn't have it. That happens.
You know what I think it is? It's letting him off the hook.
Yeah.
Initially you say, well, it seems soft to say, well, that didn't play a factor. The coming into the 8th inning, letting him pitch on Saturday, saying these aren't problems, that seems soft. No, you are letting him off the hook for not
he can
executing.
handle that. Cade Smith pitched in 3 different innings in game 2. I stop trying to find excuses.
Breaking news. Cade Smith should be the closer. No, that's not part of this. The next narrative, as you already mentioned, they should have pitched around Kerry Carpenter.
No, if he said himself he didn't have his best command, and if you're going to load the bases, Veerling was on deck. He had already walked twice in the game, and then you have no margin for error. That's a slippery slope. Again, and Carpenter could have hit it at somebody. Just go get an out. Again, go get Jake Rogers and Trey Sweeney out. That's the issue. You want to be pissed about something, be pissed about that.
Don't make excuses for Clase here. He's a big boy that should be able to handle it, and most of the pretty much all the time he does. This is why we're having this conversation.
Kerry Carpenter's really good. He's a really good hitter. He is awesome against righties. This is not a slight against him at all. I remember in August, Clase, it was the game he went 2 innings. He asked for a third. Vogt said no. But he had to intentionally walk Judge. And Clase did not like it. He understood it, but he really wanted to face him. But they had first base open, and it made sense. Imagine trying to tell him, hey, you're going to go, you got to walk Kerry Carpenter here to load the bases. No.
Well, I'll tell you why I think strategically that wouldn't. I mean, I understand the thought process that he is one of the guys you would prefer to avoid as a left-handed hitter against right-handed pitching in this lineup. There's a lot of guys that you're not that fearful of. This is one of the guys that you should be. I get all of that. But here's the thing. Every pitcher is different. Clase, if you're asking me what has a better chance of happening, Carpenter doing what he did, hitting a 3-run home run, which basically never happens, off of Clase. But you know what I have seen Clase do? Make an excellent pitch, and the guy it breaks his bat, and he flares one into center field.
Yep.
We made jokes about the bullshit base hits that Clase gives up because the contact is so poor. And what I really wouldn't want to do is put another runner in scoring position where one of those bleeders into the outfield scores a pair. So before the pitch is thrown, what has a greater chance of happening? Carpenter depositing it into the seats, or Matt Vierling coming up and hitting a bloop job into center field? I think the bloop job with the guy at second base, there's a better chance of that happening even if Clase executes. I don't want to put more runners on base in this situation, so I'm okay with it.
Was anybody voicing this before the at-bat started?
I mean, I'm sure.
Are you?
I'm sure
Person yelling at you in your mentions, were they voicing that before the at-bat started?
Well, they're going to say that they were to make their point stand better. But that's what I was thinking before that at-bat began, because I had those same internal thoughts. Put him on first base, but I didn't like the idea.
Just get an out. You gave up 5 runs all year. Go get a guy out.
Okay, fine. Fourth one. I got one more after this. Clase shouldn't have thrown 3 consecutive sliders to him.
That is fair. I think that's warranted. There's been a lot of questioning about the pitch sequencing there. No one's really given a great answer. Understandably, there's revisionist history here. You know, if he swings a like Clase wanted that in the dirt. It was supposed to be a chase pitch, and if he chases that and he strikes out, how many people are even noticing that he threw 3 straight sliders? None. He just missed, and he didn't have as good command. The warranted criticism is that the cutter has been the pitch that he's gone to 80% of the time this season. Like, what's made him super successful is making the slider kind of that, he's throwing it 20%. It's like you can't completely ignore it, but it's there. And instead he kept going back. Like you can hang it. You're not going to hang a 101 mile an hour cutter, but you can hang a slider. And I remember writing a piece in 2022 just about how dominant he was, and it was like August or September maybe. And at that point, I mean, he had given up 2 home runs in that season, and both were hanging sliders. And it was like, that's the only way you could beat him. Now, he gave up, I think, he's given up some home runs since, and ironically, none have been on sliders, but like that is one way to beat him. If he hangs a slider, you can hit it, because then all of a sudden the fact that it's 93, 94 miles an hour isn't as important. But it's just, I hate criticizing this stuff on the periphery, because the criticism, I will be a broken record here, is just get the guys out you're supposed to get out. Even if you don't have your best stuff, I like Clase's chances of getting Rogers and Sweeney. And I understand if you don't have your best command and you're throwing, like, that's when maybe you're more susceptible, and maybe he was a little more nervous about a 100 mile an hour cutter getting blooped into left center field, because we had seen that already. And I understand the thinking behind if you feel like you need a strikeout, and at least in a 2-2 count, you feel like you have 1 pitch to waste. And not only that, you could also, to the previous criticism, you could unintentionally walk Carpenter and it wouldn't be the end of the world. Like, there isn't a need to intentionally walk him, but you could throw the slider and try to bury it in the dirt, and if he doesn't chase it, it's 3-2, and you don't have your best command, and maybe you throw a cutter and you miss and you walk him and you say, okay, let's bear down and get Vierling. But, you hung the slider. So just criticize that. Criticize the fact that you didn't execute.
Yeah. It does feel like making excuses for a guy that just needed to be at his best and was not. That's the criticism.
Yeah.
Thank God they stopped mowing what were they mowing the press box? What the hell is happening?
They're still going. Don't worry.
God, we're trying to record a show here. Trying to manage everybody's grief. If you're going to throw 3 consecutive sliders, you better do what Naylor is begging for Clase to do by putting his glove on the dirt. He's saying, bury this baby. Do not hang it. And he absolutely did. And if you even look at the quality of the pitch, I know Mike Petriello had tweeted out it was one of the worst in terms of just the shape of the slider that he's thrown all season long. What a great time to throw that. I will have some pushback on the go down with your best pitch because we are still talking about the cutter and slider. The cutter probably is a better pitch. The slider is no slouch. Coming into the game in the regular season, you know what the expected slugging percentage on Emmanuel Clase cutters was? 306. You know what the expected slugging percentage on his slider was?
Isn't it like 1 something?
No, 306. Like the expected number.
Oh, yeah. But the actual is like absurd.
132 was the actual slugging on it. Sorry, no, 132 was the weighted on base average of it compared to 184 off the cutter. And the expected weighted on base average was actually better on the slider. But I'm looking at the slugging
Putting
percentage.
the woe in woba, if you will.
It's the exact same expected slugging percentage. Now, sequencing them might have been a problem. If you're going to throw 3 consecutive, you need to execute the third one. Because I can even understand the thought process as a hitter. I've seen 2 in a row. There's no way he's going to throw me a third one. I got to be geared up for the cutter.
He was geared up for the cutter. That's the thing. And the slider,
which is why he was so far out in front and pulled the hands.
Right, and the slider is just so hard. I mean, it's faster than. I mean, it was Josh Tomlin threw out the ceremonial first pitch before the game, and Clase's throwing 94-mile-an-hour sliders, and Tomlin's like, "Man, wish my fastball was like that back in the day." And like it's
prime.
Yeah, it's baseball. That's the bottom line. Sometimes you lose. Sometimes your best players make a mistake at the worst time, and that's what happens. We don't need to find all these underlying excuses.
What? I mean, we can. It's part of doing this show, or else we wouldn't be here.
Yes.
Doing some of this narrative, but I think you put the narrative in the right spot. There's certainly something to the throwing 3 sliders in a row and not executing the third one at all.
Yeah.
The first 3 points that we touched on, to me, again, it feels like you're making an excuse for a really good player. He doesn't need it. The fact is, he did not execute. If Jose Ramirez came up with the bases loaded, down by a run, and struck out to end the game, would you say, well, it's because of this, that, and the other? You'd say, no, Jose should have come through, and you're going to kill him for that, even though you appreciate everything he's done for the entire career. You can kill Clase for a horrendous pitch and still say he was the right guy in that situation, and I'd take him 100 times out of 100 to be in that spot and get that guy out.
I think that's well said.
Final one, they can't recover from this. I got that tweet.
I mean, they know who their starting pitchers are the next couple days. That might be a benefit. I don't know. Yeah, I that's just, I'm not, do I have to address that one? Like, it's...
It was
like no team has ever recovered from anything worse than just losing a game in the 9th inning.
Similar to accepting a 5-run gut punch in the first inning. Can you recover from that?
Right,
yeah, Detroit did.
Right.
Detroit
if you're
did.
the Tigers, like, how do you recover from Skubal giving you 7 awesome innings and you couldn't even take the lead?
God, that makes it more painful.
Yeah.
Because you were in a position, you survived Skubal. And you had 2 pretty good scoring opportunities later in his outing that both ended in double plays. The Jimenez one was a ball over 100 miles per hour, which had like a 430 expected batting average. That one was painful because it's one of those balls that's almost a 50-50 shot. If it makes its way through the infield, which, again, that's why it's a 430 expected batting average on a ball hit over 100, because it's either at an infielder or it's in the hole. That 50-50 shot that's going to happen, essentially. And so that one felt more like the, Naylor had one in game 1 where it gets through the infield, and everyone feels great when it gets through the infield. That one doesn't. It turns into 2 outs. That's horrific. The David Fry one, oof, God, that double play, that was a huge gut punch before the real gut punch.
Yeah, especially, you only needed 1. I mean, if Fry just hits the ball in the air, you're tied.
Get it off the ground. Get it off the ground.
Yeah. Or not tied. Take the lead.
And that's the guy. These are the guys that are in the lineup because they're facing a lefty.
Right. Yeah, that's again like everything was set up well. They just didn't execute certain things they needed to execute, and the Tigers did when it mattered most. That's it. Doesn't have to be a referendum on the season, on the series, on the players.
It was. I'd seen this tweeted. It was so different from some of the other playoff games we've seen. It was a fun game up to the moment it was no longer fun for Guardians fans. But the back and forth, great defensive plays, that Quan diving catch.
Yeah. Well, it reminded me of the game 2 against the Rays 2 years ago. Remember the play Jose Ramirez made, and then Naylor had the stretch at first place to keep that scoreless. You know, it's very gonna have some breaking news here in a little bit. Maybe
a
not
little
by the
bit.
time, maybe not by the time this gets out, but it's a showcase of what makes playoff baseball great. Nothing related to the series, for what it's worth. You know, it's the tension, it's the anxiety, it's the agony, it's you know, I'm up in the press box having no idea what to write, changing my mind. Oh, I'm going to write about Boyd. Oh, I'm going to write about Cade Smith. I'm going to write about Clase. I'm going to write about whoever gets the walk-off hit. I'm going to write about Scooble. I'm going to, you know, it's like I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea what to write. And I have no idea, like, when this is going to end, who's going to be the hero, who's going to be the GOAT. And it's, you know, and then I've been talking to, like, some players, family members who are, they've got their stomachs lodged in their throats watching these, and like it's just so intense. And I know other sports are like this too, but man, it is just so special in baseball because I feel like it's not like that at all during the regular season. You know, you have like certain moments of that, I guess, but in the end, you know that the stakes aren't all that high because it's 1 of 162. And here it's like, you know, you have someone saying, well, they can't recover from that, season's over. And like, sure, that's hyperbole, but I know that it feels that way to some fans in the moment, and it just shows you how just unhealthy the playoffs are.
And it's so tough to be in a position to win them, which is what makes Game 2 even more painful. And I can't let them off the hook the way that if I knew no context at all, Zach, and I said, like, I just woke up today, and all you told me was 1-1. You lost to Scooble, you got Game 1. I'd say, I don't know, I would say acceptable, but I would say kind of expected that. Not surprised by that at all. Hey, now it's a best of 3. I know the next 2 games will be in Detroit, but still best of 3. One of them will still potentially feature Scooble again, but hey, you know it's going to be close. Is you know what this is what the playoffs are about. But knowing the context, seeing Matthew Boyd, I won't say matched Scooble pitch for pitch because he didn't, but doing the veteran thing, just bobbing and weaving and changing speeds. How about I thought doing a great job of taking advantage of some very aggressive younger hitters early in the game, the change-ups that he would throw. I don't know how he was going to respond to a potential Game 5. You know, what adjustments will Detroit make? What adjustments will he make as a veteran? But you had Matthew Boyd, who wasn't on this team until late in the year, going toe-to-toe with the Cy Young Award winner, and you were in a position because you got that great defensive play from Stephen Kwan. I mean, we're talking about a blade of grass away from being a lead taken by Detroit earlier than they eventually did. How about John Kensey Noel making 2 great plays, one making a catch going into foul territory, the next one cutting off a ball headed for the wall, spinning and firing some mistletoe, there you go, to second base, and getting the runner out there. I mean, it's great defense being played. You're in a position, and you have the Cy Young Award winner out of the game. That's why I can't let them off the hook for this game and just say it's okay because I expected 1-1.
Yeah, and I also think that if they did pull that out, it's probably a death sentence for the Tigers. Like you're not talking about not recovering. If they couldn't win that Scooble game and they're down 0-2 and Cleveland's formula had worked perfectly twice. Like, that's probably it for the series. Instead, it's wide open. Yeah, that was encouraging from Boyd. It's a reminder that just because the other team, I said this the other day, but we don't know how to predict or forecast what's going to happen. And that's why we resort to silly things like position by position comparisons when that doesn't mean anything. And we just look at a series and we say, well, this is the pitching matchup for game 2, so I like this team. And of course, the Tigers are going to have the upper hand with Skubal on the mound, but you still have to score. And we just ignore that, Boyd only had to go 4 2/3 innings. That was plenty. And Cleveland's bullpen can match those zeros. And so there's so much that goes into it. It's not just, well, this starting pitcher is better than this starting pitcher, so this team's going to win. No, there's a lot that can happen, and I think Game 2 proved that.
You can tell us where he actually physically is, but where is Cobb entering Game 3? Considering,
Yeah.
he hasn't pitched in a while. He got those sim games, and they're saying glowing things about the sim game. But I don't know what to do with that.
It's a cool story, but it's a risky one. I mean, I think everybody listening remembers the last time he was pitching in the playoffs, 11 years ago. Obviously, he had the wild card start in Cleveland, knocked the Indians out of the postseason. Well, unless you're Kenny Lofton, who thinks that was just the regular season addendum, I guess. And then they're celebrating that, and he's like scanning the room in the visitors clubhouse at Progressive Field, and he's thinking, God, this is the coolest thing. Like, how can I recreate this scene? This is all like, it's playoff baseball, man. As we kind of just talked about, like, it's all those things it does, the anxiety, the agony. It's also addicting. And these players feel that. And so Cobb pitched 5 days later on his 26th birthday, October 7th, 2013. Faced the Red Sox in the division series. They ended up losing that series. And he thought, all right, this was a great first taste. I'll be back next year. But the Rays were a little below 500. And the year after that, he had Tommy John surgery. And then he worked his way back. And then the Rays had a couple subpar years. And next thing you know, he's signing with the Orioles. And the Orioles lose 115 games and then 108 games. And then it's the COVID season and they still stink. And then he joins the Angels and they stink. And then he goes to San Francisco because they just won 107 games. And he's thinking, hey, finally, I'm going to get to pitch in the postseason. And they regress. And then they regress even more the next year. And then he has hip surgery. And then he's trying to come back this season. And then he has shoulder trouble. And then he has a blister. And he is adamant he did not want to be traded. He wanted to keep rehabbing in San Francisco, liked the environment there, veteran team, coaches he knew, wife and kids, comfortable there. And he gets traded anyway. And he said, okay, at least it's to a contender. At least I know Stephen Vogt. I know Craig Albernaz. They all came up together through Tampa's system. I know Kai Correa. I know Matthew Boyd. So he's fine with the trade. He comes to Cleveland, finally gets healthy, makes a couple starts. He's like, hey, finally, like, this could be the chance I've waited for forever, for 11 years. Gets hurt, tears his fingernail, comes back, gets the blister. And then there were days in September where he's like, this just isn't going to happen. And he was concerned that even though the Guardians wanted him to start this game, Game 3, he wasn't even sure if he would be ready in time. Through a game, got up to like 35 pitches. Through a sim game, got up to like 60, 65. And he said, and this is a guy who's made 233 starts, and he's throwing a simulated game in an empty Progressive Field with fake crowd noise, with his teammates batting, and he said he was living and dying on every pitch because he so desperately wanted to prove to himself and to the coaches that he was ready, that he could be trusted. And he walked off the mound, and he told Stephen Vogt, I'm ready. So it's funny. He turned 37 yesterday on Monday, and he'll be making this playoff start 11 years and 2 days later, 4,021 days later. How will it go? Nobody knows, including him. And he was saying he will absolutely have butterflies, which is just crazy given how much experience he has. But he hasn't tasted the playoffs in so long. And, like, the Guardians need him to pitch well.
Yeah.
No pressure.
None whatsoever. But, at the age of 37, you don't know how many more times you're going to be here in this position on a team like this. And, yeah, you have the confidence that everyone else could get you to the next round and maybe buy you some more time to get back, but you don't want to be in that position. A guy as competitive as I think he is, you want to be part of the reason why you're getting there. Yeah, I heard him on the broadcast, and he was saying a lot of the right things about being excited and being ready, but we just don't know. The same way you don't know, you think you know everything you could know about Emmanuel Clase and what he's capable of doing and not doing, and he surprises you in the postseason. God, tell yourself in June about the start you're going to see from Matthew Boyd and Derek Skubal, and when it's all said and done, both those guys are going to be out of the game and it's going to be scoreless. You just get surprised so much in this game. It makes you look foolish because you think you know things and you don't know shit. It's the fun and it's the agony of this freaking game that we love.
It's what makes October great. And
Or
terrible.
the worst.
And awesome. And horrible. And one of a kind.
How about they score some runs off of whoever the hell Detroit's pitching? Have they even said anything?
A Detroit person guessed maybe Holton again, but nothing official that I've seen.
All right, well, we'll see how they handle the chaos. We'll be here every step of the way. Patreon.com/Selby's Godcast for more episodes later this week. And we got more free shows coming, all of the content you could ever want.